Scheduled for a joint murder trial in January, but Chad Daybell is hoping to change that.
She calls her own daughter a dark spirit. My throat fell in my stomach.
If you are very dark, your spirit has left your body. You're a zombie now. And the only way to free your spirit is to kill the body.
From a jail phone. With her murder trial still months away, Lori Vallow called her son Colby Ryan. He wanted to know about his brother and sister, about JJ and Tylie, who had been missing for over a year, whose remains had by then already been found buried on her new husband's property. He wanted his mother to tell him what had happened to them. And she said, "Nobody was murdered. I am fulfilling a divine mission." Colby Ryan posted the recording publicly. He was 23 years old. He had grown up believing his mother was someone who could be trusted with the most important things, and she was telling him, from a jail cell, that his sister and his 7-year-old brother with autism had not been murdered. That she was doing God's work. That call is the center of this case, not the evidence, not the ideology. That phone call, and what it tells you about the absolute completeness with which Lori Vallow had separated herself from the reality of what she had done. JJ Vallow loved to laugh. His grandmother, Kay Woodcock, who spent months publicly demanding answers about where he was, described the sound of it as something you didn't forget once you'd heard it. He was 7 years old. His laugh is where we start and where we end. Tylie Ashlyn. Ryan was 16 years old when she was killed in September 2019. She was Lori's daughter from a previous relationship, sharp, funny, devoted to her younger brother. People who knew the family described the bond between Tylie and JJ as one of the defining things about both of them. She was protective of him in the instinctive, unself-conscious way that older siblings sometimes are when a younger sibling needs a particular kind of care. People who knew them said Tylie understood JJ in a way that even some adults who worked with him did not. She knew what settled him and what unsettled him, and adjusted to him without making it something that required acknowledgement. She had been to Yellowstone with her family the week before she was killed. A photograph taken that day, JJ laughing, Tylie smiling, Lori in frame, would later become the last confirmed image of both children alive. Joshua JJ Vallow was 7 years old. He had been adopted by Lori and her fourth husband Charles Vallow in 2012. JJ was the biological grandson of Charles's sister Kay Woodcock. He had autism. He was, by every account from the people who cared for him, a child of enormous warmth whose disability required specific attentive care. A school that understood him, routines he could rely on, adults who knew how to communicate with him. His grandmother Kay described him as a child who made you feel, the moment you were near him, that you mattered. He attended school in Rexburg, Idaho. Then, in September 2019, he stopped showing up. When the school called Lori Vallow to ask where he was, she said he was fine and that he was enrolled elsewhere. He was not enrolled elsewhere. He was already dead. Lori Vallow was 46 years old in 2019. She had been married 4 times. She was physically striking, fitness-oriented, and by all accounts a charismatic presence in the religious communities she moved through, communities centered on Latter-day Saint offshoots that had drifted toward apocalyptic fringe theology. She met Chad Daybell in 2018. She had been a devoted mother by earlier accounts. That was before Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell was 50 years old in 2019. He had been married since 1990 to Tammy Daybell, a woman described by her family and friends as warm, grounded, and deeply committed to her 5 children. Chad worked as a self-published author of Latter-day Saint-adjacent fiction. He wrote novels about the apocalypse, the Second Coming, the end times. His Spring Creek Book Company had produced dozens of titles. He had also, over the years, positioned himself as something more than a fiction writer, as a person with prophetic abilities, someone who could perceive things about the spiritual status of the people around him. He ran preparedness seminars. He gave talks. He had, in the years before he met Lori Vallow, built a following of people who believed he could see things they couldn't. Lori Vallow moved into that world in 2018 at a preparedness conference in Utah where Daybell was speaking. People who knew Lori before that meeting described a woman who was spiritually engaged but recognizably grounded, a devoted mother, involved in her church community, someone whose faith was a source of comfort rather than a governing framework for how she judged the people around her. The transformation after meeting Chad Daybell was, by the accounts of her former friends, rapid and total. Within months of their meeting, she had adopted his theological vocabulary entirely. She began using language that alarmed her family and longtime friends. Talk of zombies, her term for people whose spirits had been displaced by dark entities, and light and dark scales that rated people's spiritual worth. She told at least one friend that her estranged husband Charles was a zombie. She told people that she had been assigned a divine mission. A former friend who had known Lori for years before Chad Daybell told investigators she did not recognize the woman Lori had become, not in appearance, but in the way she talked about the people she had once loved. These were not metaphors in the way she used them. They were operational categories, ways of sorting the people in her life into those who mattered, and those who, by her belief system's internal logic, did not. In the months before JJ and Tylie disappeared, investigators later established that Lori had been classifying both children on those scales. She had told Chad that both children were dark. In a belief system that treated dark-rated individuals as spiritually compromised and potentially dangerous to the mission, their deaths were, within the logic of that system, justifiable. That is the open question at the heart of this case. How does a person get from religious conviction to this? We'll come back to it. The sequence of deaths around Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell in 2019 is the detail that makes this case structurally unlike almost anything else in American true crime. In the space of 4 months, 4 people in their immediate orbit died, and Lori and Chad benefited directly from each death. July 11, 2019. Charles Vallow is shot dead in his sister's home in Chandler, Arizona. The shooter is Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who claims Charles had attacked him first with a baseball bat and that he fired in self-defense. No charges were filed at the time. Charles had previously filed for divorce from Lori, noting in court documents that she had told him she was a god assigned to carry out the work of the 144,000, and that if he got in the way of her mission, she would kill him. He died 3 weeks after filing that document. Lori collects life insurance. October 19, 2019. Tammy Daybell dies at home in Salem, Idaho, at the age of 49. Chad tells paramedics she had been struggling with allergies and he had found her unresponsive. The death is initially certified as natural. Chad Daybell collects life insurance. 2 weeks later, Chad Daybell marries Lori Vallow in Hawaii. In the same window, September 2019, Tylie Ryan and JJ Vallow are killed. Their deaths are not discovered for months because Lori simply begins telling people they are fine, enrolled elsewhere, living with relatives. She tells JJ's school he is transferred. She tells family members he is with other relatives. She posts photographs and social media content that gives no indication anything is wrong. She moves to Rexburg, Idaho with Chad Daybell. She gets a new haircut. She goes to the gym. She attends church. When JJ's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, cannot reach her grandson and contacts Rexburg police, they conduct a welfare check. No children are found. Lori tells investigators the children are fine. She gives them a location she knows to be false. The machinery of a missing persons investigation begins, but it is grinding against a wall of deliberate misdirection from a woman who has no intention of providing the information that would end it. And then, in December 2019, Alex Cox, Lori's brother, the man who shot Charles Vallow, dies of a pulmonary embolism in Arizona. The sole witness to the self-defense shooting of Charles Vallow is gone. Within 4 months, every person who could have complicated the narrative that Lori and Chad were building had died, been killed, or been buried. The search for JJ and Tylie became a public story in November 2019, when Rexburg police formally declared them missing and asked for Lori Vallow's cooperation. She did not cooperate. She left Idaho with Chad Daybell and flew to Hawaii, where they had married 2 weeks after Tammy's death. A welfare check at their home found only Lori's dog inside. When police reached Lori by phone in Hawaii, she told them JJ was safe and that she would not be providing his location. She did not come back. In January 2020, a Kauai judge ordered Lori Vallow to produce JJ to authorities within 5 days. She did not comply. She and Chad were arrested in Hawaii on February 20th, 2020, on child desertion charges. Lori was extradited to Idaho. She maintained that the children were fine. She said she did not know where they were. She said on a jail phone to her son that she was fulfilling a divine mission. On June 9th, 2020, investigators found the children's remains on Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho. JJ had been buried in a pet cemetery on the grounds, wrapped in a plastic bag. Tylie's remains had been burned extensively and buried in a fire pit, the degree of destruction consistent with a deliberate attempt to eliminate forensic evidence. Chad Daybell was arrested on his front lawn the same day, still in his pajamas, as investigators processed the property around him. Officers described his demeanor as calm. His wife Tammy's body was exhumed from her grave in Springville, Utah, with her family's full cooperation. The medical examiner found evidence of asphyxiation consistent with suffocation. Tammy Daybell, aged 49, had been murdered in her own bed. Chad Daybell had collected $64,000 in her life insurance. Before we get to the part of this case that is most difficult to understand, how 2 adults arrived at a place where murdering children felt not just permissible, but spiritually required, I want to take 5 seconds. A case about what belief systems can become when they are used to eliminate the humanity of the people around you is exactly what this channel is here to cover. Subscribing helps. 2 seconds. Now, what they actually believed. At the trial of Chad Daybell in 2024, prosecutors laid out the internal logic of the belief system with forensic precision. Daybell had developed a theology that assigned every person a numerical rating on a light and dark scale, a number between 1 and 100, with higher numbers indicating greater spiritual alignment with the divine mission. People rated dark, in his framework, were understood to be spiritually compromised and potentially dangerous to those around them. Their presence threatened the mission. They could not be reasoned with. They were not, in any meaningful sense within this theology, the same category of being as someone who was rated light. In text messages recovered from Daybell's phone, messages that were read aloud in open court, and that caused the gallery to fall into a silence that observers described as visceral, he and Lori discussed the ratings of specific people in their lives. Their spouses, their children, people they wanted gone. The messages showed a belief system being used in real time as a planning tool. One message discussed a specific child's rating dropping. Another discussed what needed to happen when a rating dropped too far. Dark-rated individuals were referred to as zombies. Zombies in Daybell's theology needed to be dealt with. Prosecutors argued that both Charles Vallow and Tammy Daybell had been classified as dark. Both died in suspicious circumstances within months of being given that classification. Tylie Ryan and JJ Vallow had been classified as dark. Both were dead within weeks of being given that classification. The trial testimony established that the belief system was not incidental to the murders. It was, prosecutors argued, the mechanism. The theology had provided a framework inside which killing people was not murder. It was mission completion. An Idaho juror who spoke to reporters after the verdict said, if there was a face to evil, it was hers. She had sat in court and watched Lori Vallow show no emotion during any testimony about her children. The trials were separated after Chad Daybell waived his right to a speedy trial, and Lori did not. Lori Vallow trial began on April 3, 2023, in Ada County, Boise. The prosecution called witnesses who described the victims, the belief system, the text messages, the financial crimes committed against the children's Social Security accounts. Throughout the proceedings, reporters noted that Lori Vallow sat at the defense table with an expression they variously described as blank, serene, and disconnected, as if testimony about her children concerned strangers. She occasionally took notes. When the prosecution described how JJ's remains had been found, she did not move. JJ's grandfather wept openly in the gallery. Colby Ryan attended portions of the trial. The defense rested without calling a single witness. Lori Vallow did not testify in her own defense. On May 12, 2023, the jury convicted her on all counts: first-degree murder of JJ Vallow, first-degree murder of Tylie Ryan, conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Tammy Daybell, and grand theft for collecting Social Security benefits in JJ and Tylie's names after they were already dead. She stood in the courtroom as the verdict was read and showed no visible emotion. On July 31, 2023, she was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The judge told her she had committed the most heinous of crimes. She said nothing at sentencing. She has since been extradited to Arizona, where she faces additional charges of conspiracy to commit murder in the deaths of Charles Vallow and in an attempted murder case involving her niece's former husband. In December 2024, she announced she would represent herself at the Arizona trial. Chad Daybell's trial began on April 1, 2024. The prosecution called 67 witnesses across nearly 2 months of testimony. Key evidence included the text messages about the light and dark ratings, financial records showing insurance fraud, and testimony about the state of the children's remains when they were found on his property. On May 30, 2024, the jury convicted him on all counts: 3 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. On June 1, 2024, a Saturday, Judge Stephen Boyce sentenced Chad Daybell to death. He will be executed by the state of Idaho, though appeals will extend the timeline by years. At the start of this video, I told you about JJ Vallow's laugh, the sound of it, and what it meant to the people who loved him. Kay Woodcock, his grandmother, fought for over a year to find out where he was. She went to the press. She organized searches. She pushed investigators when they seemed to be moving too slowly. She sat in court during Lori Vallow trial and listened to testimony about what had been done to him and to Tylie, and she did not look away. At the sentencing, she delivered a statement to Lori Vallow directly. She said that JJ had loved everyone he met unconditionally, that he had trusted the adults in his life completely, and that the people who were supposed to protect him had used that trust as a weapon against him. JJ Vallow was 7 years old. He had autism and needed specific attentive care and had always received it, until the summer of 2019, when his mother began describing him, in text messages to the man she had just met, as spiritually dark. He did not know that was happening. He could not have understood what it meant. He went to Yellowstone in September 2019, laughed in a photograph, and was dead within days. His Social Security benefits continued to be collected by his mother for months after he was buried on Chad Daybell's property. Tylie Ryan was 16. She was planning her future in the ordinary way of a 16-year-old, the way where the future seems large and open and certain to arrive. She was devoted to her little brother. The last confirmed photograph of her alive shows her standing next to JJ at Yellowstone, the two of them together in the way they always were. She was dead within days of that photograph being taken. She was killed by the people who were supposed to be the fixed points of her life. Tammy Daybell's family has said throughout the trials that they want her remembered as more than the wife who was in the way, as a mother of 5 who was loved, who died in her own bed, and who deserved considerably more than she received from the man she had spent 30 years married to. Her children from that marriage have had to live inside a grief that most people cannot fully imagine. Losing their mother, and then watching their father convicted of murdering her. Lori Vallow Daybell is serving 3 consecutive life sentences at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center in Idaho and faces additional charges in Arizona. Chad Daybell is on death row at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. He will appeal his sentence, as all death row inmates do, and those appeals will take years. The belief system he constructed, the light and dark scales, the zombie theology, the divine mission framing, has been documented in court records and examined by prosecutors, psychologists, and journalists. It remains, at its core, the same thing that most destructive belief systems are: a set of ideas that gave 2 people permission to do what they had already decided to do and called it something other than what it was. Kay Woodcock has said she wants JJ remembered as the child he was: warm, funny, trusting, full of sound. She wants the laugh remembered. If there is a version of justice being served in this case, it is the justice that came from a grandmother who refused to stop asking where her grandson was until someone told her the truth. Subscribe if these cases, the ones about how love and accountability intersect, are what you want this channel to keep covering.